Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, George Iceman, the Reveal Report on a Monday. Sorry for being late, just working on a few things. Been a little bit busy for me last week. You may ask what happened. Well, I usually keep my privates to myself on what's happening, but I'm gonna let you know that I had a horrible dental emergency. I had a root canal, guys, and the pain was extraordinary, and I wasn't just able to do the show with the pain I was in. So I apologize. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. And so I apologize. I'm going back again tomorrow to finish up. And so that's that. And I apologize, guys. But we have a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking about hybrid and chimera creatures. Now, me and Jess have touched on this in the past. We're going to freshen things up a little bit because of something that recently happened with the Trump administration. We're going to get into that. So we're going to talk about why this popped in my head and how this came to be a show. So I appreciate you guys all being here. If you're new, welcome. What are we about? We talk about the occult, the supernatural. We talk about the esoteric, and we bring on special guests. So we love having a conversation around table. Following this show, we're going to do a special Patreon after show, a Q&A to give you a chance to ask our guests some questions or myself. Hopefully, we can answer them with the best of our ability. Guys, I got to do a special shout out for a few wonderful ladies. And these wonderful, beautiful ladies sent something my way on PayPal. A special shout out going out to Stephanie S., Barbara H., and Miss Lisa M. Three wonderful, amazing, beautiful women who want to support this show and keep it going here on YouTube. They don't like the idea that I like to do exclusives on Patreon. They're like, just share it with everybody. So they definitely help keep the show on air every single Monday. So we thank them again, Stephanie S., Barbara H., and Miss Lisa M. So give them a thank you, please, in the comments below. Let them see your appreciation, your love. It does mean a lot, guys. People like them and everyone else, especially my Patreon subscribers, we thank you so much. We have a big month. Let me just run it down quick for you guys. It'll be posted. And next week, we have an author by the name of Nathaniel Gillis. Nathaniel Gillis studied demonology. And he has a very interesting theory in demonic possession and aliens. I mean, that's all I could say right now. I'm going to leave it there. Just tune in next Monday. It's going to be happening. Nathaniel Gillis going to be talking about demonology, his experiences, his studies, and possible a connection with alien presence. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable. Following that, we will have ourselves Gary Wayne returning. And Gary's going to be with Jesse. And we are going to be talking about something interesting. It's important because we touch on it maybe once a year. And there's a reason we're going to be touching on this. And it's secret societies. Secret societies. How far back do they go? We're going to get into that because Gary's a specialist when it comes to these bloodlines and, some of these secret groups. And I think we're going to really dive deep into this. So Gary Wayne, Jesse are going to be talking about secret societies February 24th. And then next Monday, we're going to be talking with Nathaniel Gillis about exorcism, alien beings, the possible connection. And this Sunday, it's the World News Report with myself on Patreon as I break down some of the news headlines and share some information with everybody. All right, you've waited long enough. Let's get into it. Let me bring up my co-host, who is an author. You can get her books on Amazon, and she brings a great extra thought process to this. She's went through a lot in her life. And, I'm not going to be giving that to you in her intro if you're new here. Just go back and see a bunch of our videos. But she definitely brings a lot to the table. Let's welcome Miss Jessie Zaboter. Jesse, how are you?
Hey, doing well, George.
All right. Next is somebody that, everyone, when he's on, Jesse.
Yeah, we love him.
Everyone loves this guy. And so we need to get him on. And I talked to him this week. And I'm like, listen, I need an extra date. And he's like, what? I need an extra date from you, which is the 24th. He goes, oh, he's always, because he's busy months in advance. And
Right.
so he went into his book, he did what he had to do, and he came back. He goes, you got it. And I go, amazing. So we got him on the 24th. He's here today. Guys, without further ado, please welcome Mr. Gary Wayne. Gary, hi, welcome back.
Hi, and happy to be back. And I wish I could say everybody loved me, but I get enough emails and things to suggest that that may not be the case.
Oh, I
Really?
can't believe that.
Well, you know, for comedy purposes, I'm going to suggest that on a Monday, if you guys will bear with me, I will pick out some trash comments. Jesse, you pick some out. Gary, you pick some out, and we will read our trash comments to the audience and maybe have some fun with that.
Sure.
All right,
All right.
let's begin. Biblical creatures, hybrids, chimeras, however you want to pronounce it. It's everywhere around us. Do they exist? Do they not exist? We begin in the Bible with one particular creature. Many people speak on this. Jesse has spoken about this particular creature. So we're going to get her process on this, her thoughts on this, and Gary as well. The first hybrid creature that's named in the Bible, one of them is Leviathan. Leviathan is a very interesting creature and what he represents and what he does. I'm going to play a quick clip that I found on YouTube. Then we'll get both your comments on what you think this video is, if it's hit the mark or what your thoughts on are. Check it out.
Leviathan. Leviathan, described in the book of Job, Job 41, is a powerful sea monster that God uses to show his great power over even the most chaotic and scary forces in the universe. This creature can breathe fire and has fearsome teeth, making it a symbol of chaos and evil. By controlling Leviathan, God demonstrates his supreme might. The description of Leviathan in Job highlights not only the creature's terrifying nature, but also God's ability to manage and tame even the wildest forces. Leviathan is often seen as a symbol of chaos, and is linked to other ancient stories about sea monsters representing disorder. In the Bible, Leviathan is more than just a physical being. It represents the ongoing battle between good and evil. God's control over Leviathan shows his ultimate authority and the promise that good will triumph over evil. The image of Leviathan appears in other parts of the Bible, especially in prophetic writings. For example, in Isaiah 27 verse 1, it talks about a time when God will punish Leviathan, the gliding serpent with his powerful sword. This signifies the final defeat of all chaos and rebellion against God. This adds a deeper meaning to Leviathan, showing it not just as a sea creature but as an important figure in the ultimate victory of God's kingdom.
Leviathan. Thoughts on that, guys? So we'll begin with Jesse.
Yeah, where I've read about that mostly is in the book of Job. And, in that book, it gives such details about Leviathan, that he's a serpent-like creature, but, there's this imagery that he has this jurisdiction, that his place of roaming is in the waterways, whether that's, the deep waterways or the air. In the occult, they have a lot of imagery for Leviathan, including his sigil. There's contracts in this system between Leviathan and other principalities and authorities. Those contracts are for, all waterways, including even those that are on the land, including even waterways of the womb that are made by system leaders. So very intriguing. And my first thoughts are there sea creatures still today that breathe fire or that have, it talks about the scales and the structure of the scales, that they're so tight knit together, that allows him to not only be in the water, but to be in the air.
Yeah. Gary, Leviathan, thoughts on that video and what are your comments on this creature biblically?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would classify Leviathan as chimera.
Well,
by
not
the
him,
defi-
but yes, not him,
Yeah,
not a
but
chimera
it's
specifically.
it's
but
a
creature.
It's a unique creature for sure.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
not just one, there's two. And it's the female that is killed in sometime in prehistory, and it is the male that comes to an end in the end time. So this is a hydra, multi-headed type creature, sort of represented as you would see the beast of empires that comes up out of the sea that's multi-headed in the book of Revelation. So the imagery is, I think, kind of directly sort of connected there, just as the beast empires also come to an end. So the Leviathan is killed, the female, by God in the Bible, and it's so that life isn't going to be destroyed on the earth, because two and the ability to perhaps reproduce would destroy the world. And it's kind of similar to Behemoth, that sort of way, but that's a land creature. And what's also interesting about this is we get the same accounting in almost all cultures all around the world. And it's all goes back to the age of chaos, which is what the earth is described as in polytheism, before the waters are separated from the waters below to the waters above. So either the creation or the renewal of the earth, depending on which persuasion you're coming from on that perspective. That's the period when this female is being destroyed. But what's really odd, though, is that this Leviathan is going to be destroyed in the end time, according to Isaiah 27:1, just as talked about in the video. So this is kind of strange. So is this actually a physical type of being, or is it an angel type of being, or is it kind of both, with the Leviathan kind of representing an allegory? So if it was an angelic type of being, it would be more akin to what we would understand Satan as being this serpentine beast of the sea, or the Gentile nations, right? He's the god of this world. He's the one that dominates this world and tries to keep it in rebellion and chaos, as again that show was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is Satan as the great serpent and the great dragon, because this Leviathan is also known as a dragon and a hydra type dragon to boot, it's really kind of interesting. So if the female is killed, oh, and let me just go back to the polytheist accounts as well. So we have Tiamat, which is a Leviathan type creature in the Sumerian version, where Apsu is the consort. You have Lotan, Yam, Verta, and just an endless list of names right through the various polytheist cultures around the world, telling the same story about the destruction. Now you're just going to have different gods from the pantheon that's going to destroy these various types of leviathans. So it's Indra in the subcontinent of India. It's going to be Baal, and it's going to be Marduk, and you can just sort of go through all of these. I think it might even be Thor in the Norse pantheon, as I recall, for their version of it. I wouldn't even want to try and pronounce those names without having the spelling in front of me from the Norse version. But understand that this is a common legacy. So there's something to this in terms of the creation of the earth, and something that is challenging that, just as Satan understands that the earth is going to produce the Adamites, that's going to be the resolution to the angelic rebellion. So kind of intimately tied to the creation of the Adamites. Now, what's interesting as well is there's another name that's used for a Leviathan type creature called Rahab. It's exactly the same descriptions that's used in the Bible. And one wonders whether or not that is the female name, perhaps, that was associated with the Leviathan that was killed. So just an interesting sort of thought. So if you're going to kill an angelic being, that's kind of impossible from our understanding of the physics, and not something that would be done until after the end time, when the lake of fire is going to be brought in. So if the female was killed, and if it was the same being that's in these other pantheons around the world, and it seems to be, it's a parent god that is sent to the pit prison, because all the parent gods were killed by the offspring gods, and they, you can't kill an immortal being. But what we do know is those parent gods who were ruling went to the pit prison, and then the offspring gods went there after the flood for doing the same types of crimes. So what's really interesting is Satan is sent to the pit prison in the end time. So you could apply the same reasoning that if the female wasn't technically killed but went to the pit prison, and then Satan will go to the same place as being killed. It's the same sort of allegory. And that until Satan is sent to the lake of fire, if there is a death, I don't think there is, because they're going to be tortured for eternity in that lake of fire,
Wow.
that the female Leviathan probably is sent there at the end of the end time, but will be released for a short period in the end time. And I think that's the ultimate coming back of the mother goddess, as the ones who in the Gnostic religion, Sophia created the 12 archons that include Satan and God of the Bible in their belief system, not my belief system. So Leviathan is a very interesting creature known all around the world. And there was two of them. There's only one left, but that's going to be resolved with the resolution in the end time.
Very, very interesting stuff. Leviathan, guys. So, yeah, again, this creature that's in the Bible is talked about. To this day, many in the occult will refer to Leviathan in ritual magic. They'll ask for authority from Leviathan. They'll make pacts with Leviathan. They say that Leviathan has particular territories. And we discussed this several times in the occult world. These entities, these beings that are worshipped, they have dominance over particular territories and areas. So very fascinating stuff, guys, with that specific creature.
Well, let me tap on something that I think Jesse was referring to is like you have this coming Leviathan system, which is the beast system of the end time that's known in the occult. And if Satan and Leviathan are the same creature, this is the time of Satan and his system that comes in with Antichrist being crowned for the last 3.5 years. And he is the God of this world, the prince and archon of this world. That's his complete territory, as he's usurped that authority from God for a small period of time. And then all but a portion on the earth are divvied up to all of his underling gods within his council of gods.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to another particular creature in the Bible. Let me bring him up right here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the seraphim. It is often depicted having 6 wings, a human head, and an eye on their wings. They're sometimes described as appearing like burning flames in different types of art. And they are protectors of the throne around God. So this is one depiction, very creepy and scary. This is the explanation so far. Here's another one that they did. But this one specifically, I mean, if this is real, I mean, can you imagine seeing this? I mean, you'd have a heart attack if you were to see this. But
Yeah.
let's begin with you, Jesse. What are your thoughts on the seraphim?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I saw that in real life, I'd probably be terrified as well. But it's interesting with all the occultic, renditions of the seraphim, and you get a lot of different orders, particularly the Golden Dawn, that will focus on the worship of the seraphim. And you see the crossover of that worship coming out in several different departments of the system. You have the Jesuit Catholic department where they're going to depict that seraphim maybe with some different imagery. Usually you'll see it depicted in 4 different ways or with 4 different apostle names. So either, it'll be kind of these creatures, which will be an eagle, a lion, a man, and an ox, or you're going to see that seraphim depicted, as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you'll see that as you enter into Jesuit Catholic churches, they'll have these icons of either the saints or the seraphim with those 4 images. And then you also see it in specific orders within what they're going to kind of call the Masonic department, where, it's going to come out as connected to like the lower base order is going to be the Order of the Polar Star. And then as people advance in their degrees in that order and get higher in the sovereign military, in connection to that order, they're going to advance into what is called the Order of the Seraphim. And the same imagery that we see on the left there, with a little angel face, is going to be part of their symbology that they use, along with it'll look like a cross with two cross lines through it, representing that, people who advance to that order are regional leaders within the sovereign military. So you get an actual order that's based off of the worship of this, this very seraphim.
Very, very interesting. Gary, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, this is kind of a crazy depiction. So I would notice the one on the right has more than 6 wings, so that's kind of odd.
Right.
Where the other one at least on the left has 6 wings. So this is not really a good description of a seraphim. It probably has more of a relationship to Satan and part of his seraphic, powerful aspect, as in a seraphic form, or as in Samael, according to the Jewish polytheists would qualify him on. And when you have those multiple eyes, that's got nothing to do with seraphim. That's Ophanim.
That's correct. Okay, sorry.
Right. So eyes are more associated with the Ophanim than with the seraphim. And so I think this is more of a depiction of Satan in his seraphic ministry, because the seraphims are performing in the fiery stones of the altar in heaven before God. And so Satan, I think, was one time the high priest before his fall.
Wow.
And represented by the 9 jewels, and that only Jesus will be replacing him in the future time as the leader of the Melchizedek order, because he's immortal and he's the only one worthy to do so. So seraphim are described as 6 wings, copper or burning fire, probably associated with the burning coals that, one of them takes out of the altar to put to the lips of Isaiah to take sin away in preparation for the vision that he's about to go through in heaven, as he's taken there in spirit form and vision form. And these are not only sort of burning and fiery colored or copper colored. It is the same description, kind of as you look at that, as that red dragon description in the book of Revelation as well, but with a serpent face and 6 wings. So we've seen, people might not make the connection, but people have seen like Osiris, for example, or Baal and other Middle Eastern gods that are depicted as flying serpents in the physical world. And these are called Uraeus gods, of the serpentine sort of nature, so seraphim type of angels. So I would not apply these depictions to a seraphim, and I would take them more to those Uraeus type of gods, or the feathered or plumed serpent, or the dragon creator gods of China, or the Nagas of India, or how Osiris, Zeus, and other gods were described before they were assigned more human forms in later times.
Well, that was pretty precise on that description. So thank you on that one. Gary, I'm going to give you one that you're very familiar with. I refer to this specific creature. It's not a man, it's a creature, and it's the Nephilim. And the Nephilim here, what it says is 1333. There we saw the giants, which come of the giants. We are, or we were, in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So there's a 6 foot, and I mean, that's pretty tall actually nowadays for a man. 6 foot there. It's claiming in this depiction 30 to 36 feet. Is that even humanly possible? Gary, we begin with you. Nephilims in the Bible, are they creatures? What exactly are they?
Well, and they would look like a chimera. This one here is a dark-haired giant, so
Yeah.
would likely not be the ones that the seraphim produce, because they would have blonde hair and red hair. The dark ones would be more closely associated with the cherubim. Um, and so when you see like cherubim that are depicted on reliefs, they have these black curly hair, black curly birds, thick curly beards. I mean, very similar to what Gilgamesh and Nimrod tend to be depicted as. And they have these wings on them. And then you also see ones that are identical in those reliefs, only they have a bird face, because there's 4 faces of a cherubim. So this description here would be more from a Gilgamesh type of giant
Okay.
versus the seraphim offspring, which would have been more serpentine looking. So,
But
and
Nephilim, what would the Nephilim look like? What would be, from your research, paint a picture for everybody who's watching at home. What would they look like?
okay, so basically you have a 2-to-1 height to width ratio. So they're known as stout. So these are muscular like they're depicted. The ones before the flood were somewhere between 20 and 40 feet tall. And the ones after the flood are between 11 feet. Well, even in the time of Goliath, who's 11 feet 3 inches tall, you're going to have a slightly smaller one that's 5 cubits tall from Egypt that's slain. That's going to make them, a little bit smaller, say 9 to 10 feet tall. But you're going to have Og's bed that is 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. So as the king of Edrei, and using the royal cubit like Jophisa says to give them the size, his bed is going to be 16 feet long and 7 feet wide. So he's going to be 12 to 15 feet to fit in that bed, and he's going to be 4 to 5 feet wide. The Ugaritic text, which would be more akin with this, is going to describe, along with the epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh as a post-Diluvian giant is going to be 11 cubits tall and 7 cubits and 4 cubits wide. So he's going to be 19 feet tall as king of Uruk, and he's going to be 7 feet wide. So like a different proportion than the ones that are being described in the covenant land. So 19 feet tall would be the tallest one that I can think of that is described after the flood, just as Orontes, which the river is named after, was also 11 cubits tall and a Mesopotamian god. And so he was discovered, I think, in the time of Pausanias was the historian that noted his size. Or you have 12-foot giants in the size of Achilles and giants of that time in the hero epics of Greece. So those are the sizes that you would have. I would cut it off at about the 19 to 20 feet for after the flood. But before the flood, some people think they're were as big as 100 feet tall and taller. I can't find anything I can associate that would be more than 4 feet wide. But the seraphim offspring wouldn't be this human looking product. It would be a serpentine look. So when you have Nephilim depicted in statues and things before the flood, they're serpentine looking. They were called snakes and serpents, just as the gods who produced them and ruled over them were called serpents, as we talked about with the seraphim angels. And so after the flood, you would have a similar sort of look with the seraphim angels, but they and the dark-haired giants, likely from the cherubim, I think, who are also a watcher, so part of the group that would have created giants both before and after the flood. I think you have this dilution in size that comes down. So the dark-haired ones like that are shown are Sumeria and up in the northern region of the Covenant land through Syria. So the Aramaeans, many of the ones that may have been on the opposite side to Ashtaroth and Edrei, when you get into like the Gershim and giants like that in the Mount Hermon region, in that Syrian region, and the Hurrians, which are the Hurry of the biblical Hebrew, would have been those dark-haired giants, and that would extend into the ones that intermarried with the Hittites to produce the same type of look. And a number of the dark-haired giants in imagery of southern Greece with the more red hair and blonde hair more up in the northern parts of Asia Minor and in through Macedonia and Thrace and places like that, which is why you have from the descendancy of Alexander, he's a blonde hair versus a dark-haired one.
Mhm.
So you start to make those kind of connections and you see the two different kinds of descriptions. But certainly in the beginning, the cherubim Nephilim would have looked completely different than the seraphim Nephilim. And if the cherubim took a different form, like in their lion aspect or their bull aspect or their bird aspect, they would produce giants that looked like that as well.
Wow.
I have a
Yep.
question, quick.
Yes.
So Gary, you were describing that some of them would have serpent-like features. Do you think that that could transpose today to stories that we hear of from survivors of, individuals, high-level people within the system who have kind of those reptilian-like features? Do you think there could still be genetics from that being passed down today?
Yeah, I think so. Just as with the larger skulls, they're less than what they were before. So if you want to see how that transition sort of looks with a dilution of the bloodlines, you pull up a picture of Akhenaten. And particularly if you can get more of a side image, you're going to get a very much a serpentine face there. So you're going to get this long protruding chin, these very high cheekbones, large wraparound eyes that would have glowed because they were called the shining ones, and they would light up a room with that, thin lips, and this elongated skull like a cone head, only much larger than humans. And sometimes they're depicted with these big hats and crowns to cover them. And sometimes they're shown in statues with that elongated skull. So yeah, I think that DNA continues and it resurfaces in diluted levels and it can skip generations and everything else.
Yeah.
But I think that look still continues. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, our next creature is a chimera, however you want to pronounce it. Interesting creature. Chimera is a word with multiple meanings. It includes mythological monsters, a genetic term, a term used to describe something that seems impossible. In Greek mythology, chimeras were a fire-breathing monster with the head of a lion and the body of a goat, the tail of a snake. I mean, it's a mixture of different creatures put together. The so-called meaning of chimeras. This is insane. If you read about these mythical creatures in Greece, biblically, and of course all the fairy tales that we hear from our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors, this thing is passed on. Where do these stories come from? How do they dream of this? Did something of like this even existed? Jess, let's begin with you first.
I mean, first, you've got the whole mythical creature concept, which, you get into creatures like the phoenix, the unicorn, dragons, all of those. But, when I first hear the chimera, my mind automatically goes to the book of Revelations, where it talks about creatures from the abyss in the last days. And, you get some of the same features, the lion, lion mane, the, man head, the teeth, that are very sharp. And then you get this, the scorpion tail, things like that. And I think the reality of anything like that existing, is almost a terrifying thought because we wouldn't know what to expect. The stories we hear are not that this is some friendly little creature. I think that it's enough to scare anyone. But
Gary, chime in on the chimeras. What are your thoughts on these mythical creatures? Where did these stories come from?
You
Well,
know where
you
the
get
secret breeding programs are? I'm just teasing.
Well, no, yeah. Let's not put the horse in front of the cart in front of the horse. We'll get there. Let's begin with this first. Gary, where did this stem from? That you think?
it's mostly understood from the Greek mythology, but also understand Tiamat, the female Leviathan, created many creatures herself. So one deduces that if these are not an angelic being, and we don't have a description of this type of being in the Bible, doesn't mean some of the unnamed orders, or I mean undescribed orders in terms of their looks, whether or not it's Icarus or whether or not it's Dunamis or Excusia, all the different orders the New Testament talks about some of these angels, they could have looked and had different faces. Like in Pistis Sophia, we get ones like with a boar's face and with a bear's face. So we don't know what all the angels look like, but nowhere do we get this description anywhere that I can find that's related to the angelic realm. And typically out of the Greek accounting of the Chimera accounts is these are beings that are created that are Nephilim, let's say, like, but there's something else that is going on because there's a DNA manipulation that is being done here, and they're adding in multiple parts. Like that Chimera also had feet of the bird in there. As you looked at those feet there, they're like claws or talons. So there's one animal that's created, one creature that is created in Greek mythology that's called the centaur by Hera. And Hera creates this being in the clouds off the earth. So that suggests something different is going on, and that these centaurs were this specific race, and they actually tutored a lot of the giants and the Nephilim, both before and after the flood. So that may be suggesting that there was some gene splicing that was going on in creating those spirits offspring. Sex would still have to be involved to provide the counterfeit spirit, but that tends to be a little bit more consistent. I'll read from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we talked about him a lot here, but we're going to talk about somebody named King Hambada, and different transliterations and different accounts for the same king. And he's basically an Elamite or an Olamim, as we understand him, as that comes out of those ancient terms, and one of the Aboriginal giants after the flood. So King Hambada of the Cedar Forest on Mount Hermon had the face and the paws of a lion, bull horns, vulture claws, serpent's tail, and was covered in snake-like scales. The Greek Chimera had the body, as you mentioned, which is the other one, which is significant: head of a lion, goat's head, serpent's tail, and breathed fire. So very similar, but something different. And this was considered in the Sumerian pantheon a very powerful, terrible one who was created to do terrible things to humankind. And so they were very upset when Enkidu and Gilgamesh killed King Hambada, and thus Enkidu had to pay for that crime with his life in that account. So when we look at these Chimera beings, and we look at how it's being applied through the sciences today, which are controlled by polytheism, they are doing DNA manipulation with it, and they call it Chimera projects. So I think there's a connection there with that mythos that comes down, that this is a combination. But there has to be, as in the creation of the giants, something in the DNA that passes on from the angelic being to produce the counterfeit spirit.
All right. You sound like a conspiracy theorist, you and Jesse, now talking about projects that the military's involved in, black ops, certain governments are spending money splicing DNA genes to create hybrids. I mean, that's a little bit wild. But I was surfing and scoping, and I came across a very interesting thing on Fox. I'm going to play this for you, and this was a few years ago. I want you to listen to it very carefully, then we'll talk about it. Here it is.
Human chimeras living among us, it's only science fiction for right now. Yesterday, the Senate passed the Endless Frontier Act, a bill that commits nearly $250 billion to promote emerging technologies so that America can keep pace with Chinese innovation. Back in May, Democrats shot down an important amendment outlawing U.S. participation in research that would create human-animal hybrids, also known as chimeras. China's already doing it, announcing in April that an international team successfully grew human monkey embryos and sustained them for 20 days in a lab. The only question is, what will they do next? Currently, the National Institutes of Health has banned U.S. funding for chimeric research, but that ban could very well be lifted. And who's to say that these agencies will play by the rules anyway? Remember, President Obama banned funding for gain-of-function research back in 2014, but New York AD found a way around it. And they laundered, it's the NIAID group, and they laundered hundreds of thousands of dollars to the Wuhan Institute of Virology through a nonprofit group called the Eco Health Alliance. The rest is history. Chimeric research is a Pandora's box, that's obviously from hell, that should not be opened.
Wow. So
Pandora's box from hell.
it's a Pandora's box from hell. There was a department that they were working on, and it looks like China's already doing it. People are talking about it now. Let's begin just with your thoughts. We're going to theorize about it. Let's begin first with Jesse. Your thoughts on what this specific news thing said. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, I think that we get a lot of misinformation coming down. They want to prepare people for what they're doing, but what their information they're giving about what they're doing, I don't feel is accurate. I know that there's so much in that realm of whether it's cloning, whether it's chimeras, whether it's the experimentation on embryos or children in the womb. Are they doing those things? I believe absolutely that they are. But I think that they're not going to make public what they're doing. And why do they pick, the human embryo and the monkey embryo? Because that fits into their whole theory of Darwinism, that humans and apes come from, we come from that background, which isn't true at all. But you notice that, like, even in their, release of that story, they said, only live for 20 days, right? Which that's not even really anything at all. But what I believe they do is they do their experiments and their different DNA swaps. They've gone from being able to do those experiments on older infants in the womb to, trying younger and younger at the different phases of between conception and, birth. And I think that, that should be a concern for all of us, that they're even doing such things.
Gary, thoughts on that specific report from that newscaster?
Well, yeah, I think it's like the days of Noah, that the angelic technology that was around before the flood that would have destroyed the world by fire unless the flood was brought, as I speculate, is the same technology we're being fed today by fallen angels to get us up to speed so they can bring on the end time. And so this technology, would have included this DNA manipulation that created these chimera beasts that we talked about just a few minutes ago. And there's an interesting clip. I can't really post on Facebook and places like that where they don't allow news, but I have a clip of Brennan in 2019, the CIA member, or was it maybe a couple of years before that? But he's talking about that they have the ability to control the weather with their technology, and it's very controversial because of the reaction that other countries are having or would have if they actually unleashed this technology. So we're seeing technology that we get rumors, legends, snippets of that they're working on in behind the scenes that I think is well advanced to what the snippets that we're getting. And I think we're getting a lot closer to the realization of these things. So now, if you look at another sort of thing out of prehistory, and we talked about the Nephilim, but we didn't talk about what they rode on. And they rode on unicorns. And these aren't these little, they aren't They aren't these little things that we're
Wait,
told
how
about in
big are
fairy tales.
unicorns?
These are giant horses,
Wow.
monsters, and
Okay.
they're chimeras as well. They have multiple species on them. They are DNA manipulated animal who had a horn so big it could kill a giant elephant with the horn with a single stab. And they were perfect weapons of war for the perfect warriors. Now, think about this. So, if you have coming out of Revelation 9, not just the fallen angels that went there, and this is before the midpoint of the last 7 years, just before 6 months to a year and a half, you can sort of zero in on that time frame based on the data points that are provided, and that you're going to have also the ones locked in the sides of the abyss that I referenced with a term called terrible ones that are talked about in Ezekiel 32, which are Nephilim and Rephaim. Of the worst of the giants go to the pit prison, and that the disembodied spirits that roam the earth are the disembodied spirits of the giants that are looking for an oiketerion, a soul or a body. And that if you're going to create this war, and this description in Revelation 9 in the war that's an extension out of the release of the pit prison, is both the beings on there and the creatures they're riding are chimeras.
Wow.
And the description that's in there in Revelation 9 is identical to what's described in Joel 1 and 2, which happens before Armageddon, which is Joel 3 in the book of Joel. And this is the same timing in war for the war of giant names of countries, let's say, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, who's Gog of Magog, chief prince of Meshech. Gog doesn't come out of the table of nations anywhere. Gog is a giant originally created by Iapetus before the flood. There are other giants named Gog after the flood. And Magog was his brother, as was Albion, just as other giants are named Magog and Albion after them after the flood as well. So if we're looking at technology to make oiketerions for these demon spirits, and there's 200 million of them, it could be a complete Nephilim disembodied spirit created oiketerions with perfect weapons of war that were around before the flood, that are going to carry out this war and this attack and lead the attack on Israel.
Wow.
I'll tell
I
you
have a
something.
question.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Okay, so as you're talking about that, I'm left wondering kind of the makeup of these chimera creatures. Would you more classify them as, that they are physical creatures, or are they maybe just all spirit? Like kind of how I would describe them as more like a changeling spirit, where they have to have some sort of physical host, and they have the ability to change that host physical composition. But how would you describe their makeup and how they maybe work or operate?
I think it's pretty basic to the understanding that disembodied spirits are looking for a soul and a body. Unfortunately, it has a host in it, so it
Okay, so
can.
you would put it with a host too.
No, I would say that these will be hostless. That they'll
Okay.
provide the life to it. But if it is a host, it would be a low level type of spirit. But I don't know, unless you created another new Nephilim inside, then you'd have two giants sharing the same oiketerion. Possible, but unlikely. I think it's just enough to keep it alive, let's say for 30 days, as you were mentioning, Jesse, and then have the disembodied spirit go in there and just take over.
Wow.
Hmm.
Well, guys, that was a article that was a few years ago, and just a while ago, Tucker Carlson had a very interesting conversation with one Alex Jones. I found this to be very interesting what he had to say. I'm going to play this, and I want for both of you to comment on what he says. So if you're watching, please take a look at this. Listen very carefully to what Alex Jones has to say with Tucker Carlson in regards to chimeras. Check it out.
The globalists are making aliens by mixing humans and other animals and insects and plants, and then they put them, they gestate them and use cow uteruses to grow them. This is going on everywhere. So there's like a breakaway whole civilization that's separate from us, the globalists have, with life extension technologies and cures to cancer and Parkinson's. But instead of giving us all the cures, they're keeping that for themselves, and they're just getting ready to wipe all us out, so we don't even have access to that, whether you think of it as moral or not. But they even had, people didn't believe me when I talked about it when I was reading the documents, because we weren't on TV then. I'm reading this on air, and people are thinking that they weren't all getting MIT quarterly. Then MIT, about 7 years ago, look this up, humanoid hybrid chimeras are gestating at facilities across the United States. And it goes on to say, part pig, part human, part cow, part human, so that they won't be rejected by the cows that are growing them. They then harvest the organs, they harvest the stem cells, and they've got facilities now with thousands of cows per facility with humanoids growing in them. And this is in the literature, and they don't like me because I go, here's the literature, but they won't let you on the basis. And let me tell you, with the spider goats 25 years ago, I call up one of the places in New York where they've got spider goats that are part spider. Okay, and their milk makes body armor. And I get the head guy, a private contractor in the Pentagon. He's happy. Like, he comes on. 2 days later, he calls back. He goes, "The Pentagon's really mad. They didn't even tell me it was classified. They're going to kill me if you don't take down that interview." Okay, so you're hearing all this. Look up spider goats, 30-year-old stuff. Okay, all of this. So as good as I tell you stuff is, it's also bad because there's a breakaway civilization that's really in like the year 2045, according to their estimates. They've already got way more advanced AI, everything else.
Jesse, begin with you. He went into depth about this, and he said that happened 30 years ago, and it's even more advanced for a plan that they have for 2045. Interesting. Your thoughts quickly before we sign off.
Yeah, I mean, he's absolutely right on that. They have all sorts of experiments, projects. You can look up false wombs. That's something that, they've had going for a long time. Where is this happening? Whether it's at military bases, military labs, I believe that it is happening. In that, they want us to believe that, some of that's cloning or connected to cloning. But again, I think there's a lot of falsifying of information. The other thing with that is, the rights of people, especially if, they're breeding eggs. Well, where did they get those eggs from? Where did they get the things that now they're, combining to be humans? And in that, we have, I believe, a violation of human rights. Just because somebody is created and put together in the lab doesn't mean that, others have free rights to experiment or test or, do all sorts of horrific things. But I believe that's exactly what is happening,
Gary, really quickly, thoughts on what Alex Jones said about this?
Well, I don't put a lot of faith in what Alex Jones says, but I would say directionally he's probably in the right direction on this. Even his time frame is plausible. So as you do some of the end time scenarios for timing. So do I think that the technology is there and it is being worked on? Oh, absolutely. And could it be further along than what most would think? Absolutely. We're always at least 1 or 2 decades behind on what they're releasing for information. So we should be prepared that there is no limits to what we will do in terms of those who rule this earth and fund the people to do the horrible things, just as what we see going on with AI. It is now a race on AI, and nobody is saying this is an existential threat. And all of it is, both sides of it. So I think he's probably directionally correct on it.
Very good. The reason I only bring that up is because I saw something interesting in the news, and people are going nuts over this. Hence, the topic of this is U.S. aid, us aid. Donald J. Trump has pulled it. Elon Musk is in there. He has set up a team of young people that are geniuses in the tech world, and they are finding that money is being spent obnoxiously that have nothing to do with what it's supposed to be meant for. There's stupid research and studies that are going around. And I'm just curious on your closing thoughts. Do you believe that maybe these companies in charge of U.S. aid are using this money in black projects to experiment with creatures and animals and try doing these things with the chimeras? What are your thoughts, Jesse?
I absolutely believe they are. You know, I think you look at their symbols. We talk about, you know, within that system, how they have different sigils. They have symbols that are going to mean things, things that are going to, you know, tell us who's involved. And I believe in their symbology, we definitely see things connecting, um, you know, the U.S. aid to, you know, the Brotherhood, and I believe further, you know, to all the different projects, experiments, programs. And I think we'll find that, you know, there's a lot of money being funneled into the military projects, programs, and experiments through different groups like that.
Great answer. Gary, closing statements. Do you believe that they could possibly be using funds for U.S. aid to participate in doing these experiments?
Possible, not likely.
Okay.
They're more focused in on sort of the theology and the doctrines and things like that, and I don't have enough money. But once you get Doge working in on NIH and associated groups that's there, and with the Defense Department, that I think that's where you're going to find it. And but I think it'll be shut down before they get to those parts.
Got it. Well, again, it's a thing that's been out. Keep your eyes on this, ladies and gentlemen. U.S. aid, they're going bananas for it. Things are coming out. There's already printouts of where they saved money on. So I'm curious to see where it goes. It popped up, and I figure, well, if one thing connects to another, I guess we'll wait and see. Chimeras, monsters, creatures, the things that horror movies are based on. Are they horror movies? They say with every fairy tale is some truth. Interesting stuff. Jesse, Gary, I thank you for joining us. A lot of people in the chat have so many questions.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have an after show on my Patreon. We'll give you a chance to ask some of these questions. The link is in the description. Before we sign off, Jesse, how can people support and follow you for your wonderful ministry?
Yes, you can find me on kingdomlivingwithjesse.com, and I encourage you to check out. I have my brand new book I just released this last week, Faithful in All His House, on Amazon.
Excellent. Gary, yourself, how can people follow and support you?
Best way to follow or support me is through my website, and to purchase my book. That's the only revenue that I accept, unless I go speak somewhere. So that's the Genesis6conspiracy.com, and you can get my book available in softcover off the website, and signed copies any way that you want it. There's a buy book 1, buy book 2, and then buy 3 page is a mixed bundling. You can also link over to Amazon.com for the Kindle version, or Amazon.ca or .uk, wherever for that. And also the same, you can link over from the website for the Audible versions for both books. And so that's the easiest way to get a hold of my books and or support me directly.
Love it. Thank you so much. Guys, for myself, I want to thank you all for watching and supporting. We'll be back next Monday. We talk about demonology, demons, a possible association with aliens. Wow. Our guest, Nathaniel Gillis, will be here. It's going to be the interesting stuff. Again, if you like the show, please support me by going to paypal.me/George Iceman. I don't write any books like Gary or Jesse, and I don't have these ministries and programs. I'm a YouTube guy, and this is how I do it. So I appreciate all the help going my way to keep this show going, to put in time and effort to produce these type of things. PayPal.me/George Iceman. Everything and anything goes a long way. Again, guys, I want to thank you all for being here. Get outside, get some fresh air, get some vitamin D, guys. Raise your vibration and don't watch the fear porn. That's what they want. They want to keep you submitted. They want you in fear. They want you at a very low frequency. But we'll get more into that on the after show. That's all for me, guys. Anything you want to add?
We'll see you all in the after show.
We'll see you in the after show. Good night, everybody.